So welcome everyone. I'm ready to start officially. I have my favorite type of guest today. Favorite because of the science that my guest is representing, and also because my guest, has a very strong academic background, and that's exactly what I love. I love talking to scientists. So my guest today is Loretta Breuning. Welcome, Loretta.
Hi, nice to be here.
I was a little nervous to pronounce your name properly, but I think I managed. Welcome to Mind Valley, and it's a pleasure to have you here. So I'll do the official part. I'll read the bio first, and then we'll go into the conversation. So Loretta Breuning, PhD, is founder of the Inner Mammal Institute and Professor Emerita of Management at California State University, East Bay. She's the author of many personal development books, including Habits of a Happy Brain, Retain Your Brain to Boost Your Serotonin, Dopamine, Oxytocin, and Endorphin levels. As a teacher and a parent, she was not convinced by prevailing theories of human motivation. Then she learned about the brain chemistry we share with the earlier mammals, and everything made sense. She began creating resources that have helped thousands of people make peace with their inner mammal. Dr. Breuning's work has been translated into 12 languages and is cited in major media. Before teaching, she worked for the United Nations in Africa. Loretta gives zoo tours on animals' behavior after serving as a docent in the Oakland Zoo. She's a graduate of Cornell University and Tufts. The Inner Mammal Institute offers videos, podcasts, books, blogs, multimedia, and training program, and a free 5-day happy chemical jumpstart. We'll actually share the details later, because that's my traditional last question anyway. So we can hold that thought. But yeah, as I said, that's my favorite kind of guest, because first of all, I really love talking to people who come from the science background, because science, well, maybe it's my own background, but I think it's such a good way to approach the world, trying to explain it, to understand it, to see the connections, to see the laws of nature that govern it, if that's applicable to everything. And also, you talk about happiness, which is, I think, a very interesting topic, because on one side, a lot of people talk about happiness nowadays, but very often we talk about it dismissively. And my personal idea is that we, as contemporary humanity, we undervalue it, and we maybe misunderstand it to a degree. We always compromise happiness to things which seem to be a little bit more certain, like success, like career, like even mission and meaning. Yet somewhere deep inside, I believe everybody wants to be happy. At least that's what we wish everyone that we love in our life be happy. So it's a pleasure to have you. Welcome. Sorry for a really long-winded introduction.
There's a lot to talk about.
That's great. And I'll start with maybe a funny question. So you were puzzled by things, the way humans function, and then you discovered that we function pretty much like all the other mammals nowadays in our contemporary world. And also this part about you doing the tours in the zoo, explaining the animal behavior. Is it really so bad? With all our civilization and development, are we still really basically just animals?
So we have two brains. We have the human part of the brain called the cortex, and we have that internal part called the limbic system, which has things people have heard of, like the amygdala and hypothalamus. And that's the same as in other mammals. And that's the part that controls the chemicals that make us feel good or bad. So the two brains have to work together. It's not like one is good and one is bad, and you shouldn't be using that, because you can't function without using your mammalian limbic system, because it is literally the connection between your thoughts and your body. So, you know, the higher brain, the middle brain, and then that's how the thoughts pass through to either I'm going to go or I'm going to not go. That's what controls my body with chemicals. So we have to learn to manage this system we've inherited.
So it's not horrible if you feel like you have an animal raising its head inside of you, or is it something to, I'm sorry, I'm going to use a little radical word, but eradicate or fight?
Exactly. Well, sometimes you do have to fight it, if it wants to eat a second quart of ice cream or something. But you shouldn't think that it's bad that you have one. And you should know that everyone else has the same struggle. And also that your human cortex is not always right either. It's not like this simple thing between rationality and emotion. Again, we have two brains because we need both. And the simplest way to think about it is a horse and a rider, that the horse sometimes wants to go the wrong way, but sometimes the rider makes mistakes too. But when they have to work together in order to get anywhere.
You know what? I'll ask a question which is a little bit to the side, and maybe it's not a very fair question in this current discussion. But as far as I understand, we humans, we understand how our brain works. We might not understand everything, but we understand how we feel things, why we feel things, what's the healthy way to react. Why is it that it is such a mystery to most people? Why is it still not a common knowledge? Like, we learn how to read. Why don't we learn how to operate our brain? It's not like a rocket science, I think. Well, maybe it's rocket science, but I mean, it's not completely black box.
So first, the animals can't talk. So the animal brain can't tell you in words what it wants. So what the animal brain wants is things that you've learned are bad that you shouldn't want. So when you have a feeling, then your human cortex says, oh, you shouldn't want that. And there's good reasons for this and bad reasons for this. The good reason is, imagine toddler tantrums, like a toddler, you give them a cookie and then they just want another cookie. And if you don't give them another cookie, they scream. So that's that natural animal impulse, is like, I want it and I'm going to put all of my energy into getting it. And animals will fight unless the other one is bigger than them. So then if they see that the other individual is bigger than them, then they're like, okay, you can have the banana. I'm not going to fight you for it. So the animal brain works on principles that are not really nice. So we learn when we're very young that we have to restrain that. And so then we get to the point where we're restraining it so much that we have to pretend that we didn't even feel that. I didn't even want to have a second cookie. I didn't want to grab that banana away from you. So that's when we have this division between our natural impulses. And then academic psychology, in my opinion, they make it worse, because they've created this idea that animals are all peace and love and cooperation and altruism, and that your natural state, this also comes from religion, that your natural state is automatically love, and everything bad comes from society. So then you get into this mindset where you blame all of your negative emotions on society rather than understanding how you've created them. And then you lose your power over them because you think they're being forced on you from the outside instead of knowing how you could shift them.
That's a very interesting angle you just touched upon, because I agree. I don't know so much from the academic psychology point of view, but I know from the point of view of personal growth and transformation, the industry that I've worked in for many years, that we do tend to idealize everything nice and good and demonize everything which is unpleasant. And I don't say it's bad, because it might be just unpleasant. And as you said, we blame it on the society that, we're born pure love and we learned to be afraid. How grounded are these accusations are actually in our biology, or is it not so simple?
It's in between. So there's two things. First, animals feel fear because that helps them survive. So animals feel a lot of fear, first from potential predators, but also from, if they don't meet their needs, they could starve to death. We think animals just get food easily, but they really have a lot of hunger and thirst, and they have to work constantly to find enough food to survive. And then they have tremendous conflict with other members of their species. So all of this suffering in the animal world is all ignored by nice thinking people because of what I call the Rousseauian paradigm. Rousseau said that nature is all good and civilization is the cause of everything bad. So that's one part of our negativity. Another part is that we're born with billions of neurons, but almost no connections between them. Humans have almost no hard wiring. Animals have more hard wiring, and that's why they're able to leave home after a year and find their own food. Some of them leave home in the instant they're born, and they know how to find food because of hard wiring. But humans take like 2 decades to find their own food. And that's because we have so many neurons, but they're useless until we connect them. So how do we connect them? Not from a blueprint, but from experience. So when you were young, anything that made you happy, that was like paving on your neural pathways. Anything that made you unhappy, that paved neural pathways. So when we grow up, we face the world with a neural network built by our own unique past experience. So anything that made you feel bad in your past is like now the lens, and you're looking for that and you're worried about that. Anything that made you feel good in your past, you want that, even if it's, not always good for you. So everyone has this challenge.
So if these feelings or reactions to the world are learned from childhood, and they are on the brain level, so obviously they are so fast that you can't think about them, you just feel what you feel. Can you think yourself out of those neural pathways to change them? Because, for example, if somebody or if your childhood experience has taught you to feel good about something which is unhealthy for you, psychologically speaking, or for example, like you've been eating chocolate every time you were upset, it's not a very good neural pathway, right? Can you think yourself out of those neural pathways, or does it require a little more complex approach?
Sure. This is what my work is about. So what I learned is that those old neural pathways are very, very strong and efficient for reasons I explained. So we flow into them without even realizing we've made a choice, because the electricity in your brain, it flows into the biggest pathways, just like when it rains and the water flows into the pathways that exist. So we have billions of extra neurons ready to build new pathways, but the new pathways are not efficient. They're not built up, so we don't flow into them. So it's awareness of like flow versus non-flow, that something new is hard at first. And even if it's the right thing, even if I'm doing something good for me, it feels bad at first because it's so hard to get my electricity to flow into a new pathway. So to make it less highly charged, I compare it to learning a foreign language. So if I'm sitting at a table ordering a meal, if I order it in my native language, the words come effortlessly because those are pathways I built when I was young. But if I try to order a meal in another language, I have to struggle to find the words. And that struggle is just to activate a neural pathway that I haven't used a lot. And so we can change our response to the world if we create a new pathway. It's like learning a word in a foreign language. First, I have to learn it, and then I have to repeat it a lot.
So I want to talk about motivation a little bit. I think I read it in your bio as well, this word. So any kind of struggle is actually a little bit hard. Well, not a little bit, it's hard for people. And we often have to rely on willpower, and there's a lot of resistance. How do you motivate yourself to actually, let's take a more practical example. You have a bad habit you want to override with something else. How do you find motivation to actually keep working on these new neural pathways?
Sure. So motivation comes from the brain chemicals that make us feel good: dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, and endorphin. And each of these has a very specific job in nature, and it causes a very specific good feeling that motivates an animal to do something that an animal needs to do to survive. And again, we don't like to admit that we have these motivations, and yet we want the good feelings. So The simplest one is dopamine, which is just the expectation of a reward. So if you're an animal and you're really hungry and you have to climb a tree and you're tired and it's dangerous, but you keep going because, oh, I'm so close, I'm going to get that reward. So if you want to change a bad habit, so it's the anticipation of a reward that motivates you to do it. So it's like, you know, the famous example is when people want to lose weight and they're told to anticipate how great life will be once they lose weight. Now, the problem with this is, first, now we're told that we shouldn't care about rewards. In the modern world, this is the new law. Oh, I don't care about rewards. I just care about peace and love for the world. And that sounds good with your verbal brain, but it doesn't really motivate you. It doesn't stimulate your dopamine. But then the other extreme is if you say, oh, I'm going to eat healthy and then I'm going to be beautiful and everyone will love me. Well, that's not realistic. That's not how the world works. Everybody doesn't love you if you lose weight. So, so the simple answer to your question is we need realistic expectations about rewards. And then we have to divide it into very small steps so that you know you can succeed. And it's when you expect to succeed that your dopamine is stimulated.
So if you think about reward, but you are not sure if you're going to get it, you're not, your body is not producing dopamine.
Exactly.
Wow, that's an interesting aspect which we don't talk about very often. It's very in a way fun and also curious how you keep calling us animals. I think it's remarkable, and it's actually also very, very sobering. So I actually want to talk about happiness because it's my favorite topic, and I know that you I mean, your research also had origin there. So from the point of view of neuroscience, or from the point of view of how our brain works, or from the point of view of animals, what is happiness? And in fact, do animals even feel happiness? Or is it a human construct?
So the chemicals that make us feel good are the same in all mammals. And when I tell you what these chemicals do, you can recognize, oh yeah, that's what I'm looking for. But that's what you're looking for in your nonverbal brain, because in your verbal brain, you can't admit that you want this. So first is dopamine. And as I said, that's the anticipation of reward. That a reward is something that meets a need. But in the modern human world, our food needs are met so easily that we're always looking for something else. But you should have to understand that it was a very short time ago that our ancestors were hungry and cold, and they had to work hard to get enough water. So like to get a bath, like everything was so hard that like they were so happy if they only got like, I use the example when my mother would give me an orange for Christmas, because when she was young, an orange was a real reward. It was so scarce that she was happy when she got it. So that's a reminder. Now, that's why people have trouble. Like today, you want something new and exciting to feel dopamine, but then you're not supposed to. We shouldn't always want something new. So you can't even acknowledge that you want it. So that's the dopamine problem. So let me move on. Then there's a oxytocin problem and a serotonin problem. So oxytocin is the good feeling of social support. And you could see how everyone wants social support, but it's not realistic to expect that the world will cuddle me and love me like a newborn baby all the time. And yet that's what we want. So it's sort of like the dopamine problem is like, I want it all the time. In nature, the way you got it is you stay with your herd. And whenever you leave your herd, then your oxytocin falls and you might get eaten. So that motivates you to go back to the herd where you have protection. But a herd has conflict. A herd is like they're peeing on your food. When you're, that's how we get frustrated when we're too surrounded by people and we're expected to conform. And yet when we leave the herd, we feel like a predator will eat us because in nature that was realistic. So it's that tension between I want the herd and I don't want the herd. And the other part of this is it's really what your brain wants is protection. You want others around you to protect you, but you can't admit that you want that. So we create these illusions. Oh, I only care about other people. I just want to give to others, because that's how you get social support in the modern world, but you can't admit that your core urge is to be protected. And finally, serotonin, complicates it even more. So in the animal world, they're extremely competitive. And when an animal is in the one down position, it doesn't get food because a stronger individual grabs it, and it doesn't fight back because it knows it will lose the fight. So the animal brain is constantly comparing you to the one next to you and judging, am I stronger or am I weaker? And this is what humans are doing all the time in a nonverbal way. You're comparing yourself to others and saying, am I stronger or am I weaker in my own opinion? And if I'm stronger, my brain releases a little bit of serotonin. It says, yeah, I can do it. I can get that banana. But if I think I'm weaker, then I think I'm not going to get the banana. I'm never going to get what I want. Everybody else is going to get it and not me. So how do I decide if I'm stronger or weaker? Well, it's really a learned thought. So some people are always focused on their weakness. Some people are always focused on their strengths. And most people, they're like choosing all the time. Like when I'm with these people, I'm very aware of my strength. But when I'm with those people, I'm very aware of my weakness. So we drive ourselves crazy because we want to be in the one-up position all the time, but it's simply not realistic. And a monkey would get killed if it went around thinking, oh, I'm bigger than you all the time. So we're really designed to make realistic judgments about our own strength. But in the modern human world, we're so spoiled like that we just want to be in the one-up position all the time. And the example I use is in a kindergarten, every child gets to be the star for 1 week. But then you know that the rest of the year, the other children will be the star, and you have to live with that.
So you also mentioned the ancient origins of humans and how we functioned in the tribes and in the communities. I've heard sometimes when we talk about biology of our emotions, the idea that, when you get so stressed, and that response is the kind of response that you felt when you lived in the nature in the wild, and a tiger was lurking behind the bush. But nowadays you're not living in that environment, so you losing the keys is not a question of life and death. How helpful is this kind of connection? And does that mean that our biology should be rewiring itself, considering that civilization has existed for a few thousand years now, probably more than a few thousand, maybe a few decades of thousands of years? Do we need to rewire how we function, or should we just embrace the fact that our animal part is very quick to react?
So I believe every individual has to do it for themselves. So I'm born with a potential to feel fear because it would be crazy not to. I would have gotten run over by a car when I was 2 years old if I didn't have my natural fear mechanism. On the other hand, if I had another child steal my toy when I was 2 years old, and I spent my whole life fearing other people stealing my toys, then that would be unnecessary fear. So we all have to build wiring to manage this fear mechanism that we have. So I think of it as nature's alarm system, and we have to learn to wire our alarm system. And we are lucky that we're not born with fear of predators the way animals are. There's been a lot of research and a lot of disagreement. Are animals born hardwired to already fear a predator, or even animals learn from experience? For example, if I'm a young gazelle and when my mother smells a predator, she runs. And then I feel fear. I don't understand what a predator is, but I run because my mother runs. And I learn to feel that fear because I'll lose my mother if I don't keep up, and then I'll be hungry. So hunger creates the fear. So it's healthy that we learn the fears of those around us to a degree. But then you get to a point where you say, gosh, these people around me are feeling fear all the time. I'm going to make a choice not to share in their fear. But then you know what? Then they may get angry at you. They want you to share their fear. They ostracize you if you don't, because then they say you're not supportive. So we all have these terrible decisions to make of when to join the emotions of those around us and when to decide to reprogram our emotions. And it's a very difficult choice because there are risks to leaving the herd and there are bad feelings when you stay with the herd. So when I have this terrible choice, I tell myself, it feels bad, but every animal is making this decision every minute, because if they leave the herd, they risk getting eaten by a predator. But when they stay with the herd, they have to eat food that has been peed on by another individual. So this is just a hard choice.
So on that note, I actually didn't plan to talk about fear, but I think fear is such a prevalent feeling that we have, not always acknowledging it. How much fear is a healthy amount? Because I understand that not having fear is also not a very good scenario.
So fear is like a full surge of cortisol, but then we have what is a drip of cortisol, like a little drip, which is known as stress or anxiety. So it's the constant drip, but the big thing is this is the anticipation of a threat. And that's what the problem is. So in the animal world, it's simple as like the predator is far away. So if I go closer, then that's not safe, but I'm safe as long as I stay here. So we're all looking for that, like what I can do this, that's safe. But then if I do more of that, it's not safe. But then we have the same problem is like, if I only do things that are safe, then I don't get my big dopamine. So we're all wanting, what can I do that makes me happy? But then I don't have to take any risks. Well, that's not realistic either. That's one part of it. And then there's another part of it, which is when something goes wrong, people tell you, oh, you should have anticipated that problem and acted to prevent it. So then we're thought, I was in the quality control revolution in the 1990s. Before that, people had cars that broke all the time, and your car was always broken on the road. And then people fixed the problems with cars by learning to anticipate something going wrong. So then we were all pressured, like nothing should ever go wrong. You have to anticipate everything that could go wrong and take action to prevent it. So I think that's what's now driving people crazy, is like, I should take big risks and do fabulous things, but I should anticipate every possible thing that could go wrong and not let anything. So this is not a realistic expectation. So that's my conclusion is we have to have realistic expectations. We can't be happy every minute, and we can't prevent all anxiety.
Talking about measures of neurotransmitters in our bodies, you mentioned a little earlier, and I want to talk about that, but then fear kind of got me distracted about the dopamine. That if we keep chasing dopamine, that at some point we become, I do not know, you didn't use these words, but I'm loosely quoting you, that you become immune to that. Things stop being so amazing. Can you overdose on your on the chemicals in your body, and what to do to prevent that? Do you have to create discomfort to feel joy for, I don't know, a little meal that you get once in a blue moon?
Sure, I know this is a big thing, people talking about dopamine detox. Yeah, a lot of people are doing a dopamine diet or whatever. So I think the big thing is awareness, and awareness that I am doing something because it excites me. So I want to do it again because it excites me. But if I do it all the time, then there are going to be negative consequences. But if I don't do it at all, then what? And that's what I think people really need to understand is, I call it a vicious circle versus a virtuous circle. So when I'm busy doing something I like, I don't think about fears, problems, threats. But simple example would be, let's say I buy some, for one person it's food, for another person it's alcohol, for another person it's shopping, whatever is your bad habit. When you're doing that, you're not having bad thoughts. But the minute it's over, then bad thoughts come back into your mind. And the only way you know to push the bad thoughts away is to do more of your particular habit. And that's the vicious circle, because then when you do your habit, then you feel even worse. So you have more bad thoughts. So then you want to do the habit even more. So a virtuous circle is to say, oh, I'm having a bad feeling right now because that's a neural pathway I created in my past.
Yeah.
One way to deal with this bad feeling would be to distract myself with my usual habit, whether it's food, alcohol, shopping, overworking, could be anything, right? Even over-exercising for many people here in California. So if I know that I've created that loop myself, that there are millions of other ways to make myself feel good rather than that one bad habit, and it's okay to want to feel good. And if I'm more familiar with many other ways of feeling good, then I won't overdo this one particular way. So that's the way I think of it, is instead of, if you tell your inner mammal you shouldn't want a reward, then your inner mammal is going to feel bad. But if you tell your inner mammal that it can have all the rewards that it wants, then you're going to hurt yourself. So in between is like giving your inner mammal healthy rewards in limited quantities often.
Coming back to the overdose, I want to ask a little bit funny question. If a person was left or allowed to do whatever they like, if everything was in abundance, I do not know if there's research looking into that, but is it likely that an otherwise normal human being would just stay in bed eating, I don't know, ice cream after ice cream and doing nothing? Or is there at some point a situation where you don't want that anymore? And I'm talking like from the chemical point of view.
Very good question. Okay, I do not represent academic psychology, for the reason is that they live in silos where one person studies one thing and another person studies another thing, and they're not allowed, they don't talk in a way that is respectful. So there's a person who's studying, let's say you use the example of, I think, ice cream. So one person would study your response to the ice cream, and then another person would study the neural pathways that control that response, and they're not communicating. So I've done my own work, and I'm very aware. So the big example people use is pets. If you go away on a trip for a week and you leave your pet one whole week of food, will they just eat it all and get sick and then starve the rest of the week? So most of them will, but academics can create, they like to create studies that show animals behaving well, to give people the idea that our nature is good. And I don't trust that process. So most people know that their animal will eat too much food and get sick. But humans, you think, well, why don't you stop yourself? So the simple example is young people go to college and they're in a world where other students are drinking too much and getting sick. And some people will join that and develop a bad habit. Other people will not join it. And other people are in the middle where they join it a little bit, but then in the future, they're able to stop. So the difference depends on the other neural pathways that you have. So have you learned a variety of ways to make yourself feel good? And have you wired in a lot of fear so that you must do something every minute to distract yourself from that fear? Or have you wired in self-management to question what you hear from people around you? Or have you wired in, I need to follow the people around me either because I fear them or because I don't trust my own judgment? So it depends on the other neural pathways that you're bringing to this individual habit. And again, you can build new neural pathways, but those core self-management circuits are so big that people tend not to challenge them. It's what people think is like their character. They don't realize that it's learned, so they don't see their power to relearn it, which is why we have a whole therapy industry designed to help people do that. But in my opinion, the therapy industry gives the person the belief that it's a disease and that someone else is going to fix them. So that really doesn't help you see that it's a neural pathway and you have to build a new neural pathway.
So I still want to understand. So from the point of view of us as animals, we are going to overdo things if we are allowed to. And it's
yes, but not
trait.
everything. It depends on the pathways you built when you were young. So for one person, like they could see a whole bowl of candy and it doesn't even interest them. I don't like candy. So like, depending on what you learned was a reward when you were young. Okay. Other people learned, like you grew up and people did too much of this, but didn't do too much of that. And it's not necessarily that you're repeating what your parents did. You're repeating whatever worked for you when you were young. So I have some habits that worked for me when I was young. So I will overdo them and I have to really work at that. And then everyone has that particular thing.
So it's not even like different people react differently, but you may react differently to different stimuli, just one human being. So since we are talking about, I believe we are going into a little bit of the addictive side of our nature. I want to ask maybe a little bit contradictory question. You mentioned that too, that some people run away into exercise. And I know my masseuse, we've had this conversation with him jokingly a little bit. He likes to cycle, and I once asked him what he was cycling away from. So from the point of view of this addictability or overdosing on dopamine, is there a danger about overdoing a good habit, whether it's walking out in the nature or meditating endlessly or working? Well, working, obviously, there's a danger in that. Exercising, or I do not know, being fanatical about your health.
Yes. So I went to yoga class for many years and I saw a lot of this. So I'll give you two examples. And again, my inner mammal is looking for dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. I'm trying to get it in ways that worked for me in my past, but in reality, there are thousands of ways to get it. I'm just looking for the ways I got it in my past. So in my yoga class, everyone feels very superior because we in the yoga community are conscious and all those other people are not conscious. So that is that I told you, you get serotonin when you see yourself in the one-up position. But then if you're always focused on, I'm good because I'm conscious and you're bad because you're not conscious, that's your only way to get serotonin. And maybe you have other aspects of your life that you feel bad about, and you're running away from those bad feelings because you don't really understand that they're just pathways. So maybe you're really angry because you have a cousin who earns more money than you, or your partner has maybe is not loyal to you. So you feel so bad that the only way that you could feel one up is by keep going back to, like, maybe this person who cycles, and they cycle more than other people, so they feel good about that. But then every time they're reminded of all those other aspects of life that they feel bad about, they don't understand those feelings. They don't know that it's just a cortisol circuit. So they have to feel more cycling, because that's the way they only know to feel like, oh, I'm a better person. And the really sad example of this, in my opinion, is what's called an elimination diet. So a person feels bad about their life and they get the usual diagnosis and they think, oh, I'll feel better as long as I eliminate this certain food from my life. And for the short run, they feel great because eliminating that one food, it's dopamine, which is the expectation of a reward, because I think I'll feel great. Then there's serotonin, because I tell everybody, oh, don't eat that. You shouldn't eat that. I know better than you. I'm not eating. And then there's oxytocin, because you bond with all the other people who have this paradigm. But then after a while, dopamine stops once it's not a new thing anymore. And then you don't feel good all the time because you haven't dealt with the real underlying problem, that you feel angry because this cousin of yours is doing better than you and your partner is disappointing you. So then what do? You eliminate another food from your life. And you get, again, the dopamine, the serotonin, and oxytocin. And then you probably know people who have eliminated 10 different foods from their life, because it's when they say, when the only tool you have is a hammer, you see everything as a nail.
I actually can relate, because I mean, I've been in this industry for such a long time. It's sometimes so much easier to fix the things that you have fixed before and that you know how to fix, rather than deal with this one problem which might be there. And I have the really naughty analogy. It's like cleaning up the house and leaving a pile of dung in the middle of the living room. No matter how clean the house is, that pile is going to ruin everything. But I want to give a chance to our guests to also ask questions, because I see there are a lot of questions. So Bianca, if somebody wants to join us, please bring them up or read their question if they are shy to join such wonderfully looking two ladies. But I hope somebody will join us. I really like to see our audience also on screen next to us. Meanwhile, I wanted to ask, so it looks like almost everything that we are talking about comes back to acknowledging the things that you actually feel. So what is stopping us from saying, well, I feel angry, I feel scared, I feel jealous, I feel like I want something that doesn't belong to me?
Very good, because you learn that you're not supposed to feel that way. And the I'm becoming a virtuous person and I shouldn't feel jealous. And then it feels hopeless. Like if I'm jealous, then it feels hopeless. So a better way to think about it is, I feel jealous because I have this old pathway that it was a very reasonable thing for me to feel jealous when I was young, because I was in that situation, and that built a big pathway, and the pathway causes me to focus on that. But the good thing to know is that when I feel bad about this, the bad is a chemical that my body will just use up in an hour, and the bad feeling will be gone. So it's good to know I created the feeling. The feeling will pass soon. I won't feel this way all the time, and I can rewire the feeling. I've created it, so I'm not a victim of the world. And so to have a more positive view of negative feelings. Otherwise, you just think, well, I shouldn't feel that, so I don't feel it.
That was a very, very valuable, simple formula to face your unpleasant feelings. Meanwhile, we have Monica joining us. I'm so glad. Thank you. Thank you for joining us, Monica. And with a video too. Yay. I'll pass the microphone to you.
Hello.
Hi.
I'm loving this conversation. So I would like to know if you have suggestions of habits or rituals that we can do in our morning routine or throughout the day that could optimize brain function.
Yes, sure. So I have this idea that when you build a new pathway to the behavior you want, then that becomes a big pathway and you flow there easily. But in the beginning, it's hard. So how can you do it? And the answer is small repetition. So my suggestion is 3 times a day, stop what you're doing for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, just very short, and focus on whatever it is this goal is. So the goal could be the new positive behavior that you want to wire in, but sometimes the goal is to become aware of the negative feelings that you're having, to be honest with yourself, like, what was I really thinking and feeling? So whatever you decide that you want to use this for, but don't kill yourself about it. Do it for just 30 seconds, but do it often, 3 times a day. And sometimes you need to really set an alarm clock to set a timer to make sure you do it, because it's not fun.
This
Right.
is such an interesting approach, by the way, because I've heard other people talk about habit change, but setting an alarm and just doing it, not killing yourself over it, but just repeating it frequently, that's seems much more doable in my opinion. Monica, do you want to ask something else?
And I had a second question about foods, like things that we could eat and include in our diet that could help with a happy brain.
Sure. So I know this is the perspective that many people are taking, but I don't take this because the whole belief that something from outside me that I'm going to put in my mouth is going to make me happy or make me smart or make me nice, whatever it is. It distracts you from understanding your inner mammal. So what I think is more helpful is like to know that whatever this food would be that I would have to make me better, then I just want more and more and more of it. So what I really focus on is giving myself variety. So variety stimulates dopamine, and a way to get dopamine without eating as much is to give yourself variety. And the other thing, just because I know the food challenges, it's so challenging because mammals want food all the time, is to give yourself fiber. So I focus on always eating something with fiber because it gives you more of a feeling of satisfaction. So like if I have a cookie, so I like have a cookie, but I make small cookies with a lot of nuts in them because nuts have a lot of fiber. It's just an example of how I can give my inner mammal what it wants without being too unhealthy.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Monica, for joining us. It was a pleasure to have you here. Bianca, if we do have a little more time, so if somebody else will be willing to join, I'd be glad to give space. But on the afterthought of your conversation, you just mentioned that you don't believe in taking things from the outside to make you feel or be different. On the other hand, we were talking about chemicals in our body, something which our body produces. Does that also mean that you can pretty much fix any kind of emotions with ingesting chemicals from outside? I do not know, to counteract, for example, cortisol, or is that a slippery slope?
So this is difficult because this is the medical model that we're taught. So it might be helpful if we explain that each of the happy chemicals is equivalent to a drug of abuse. So dopamine is cocaine. So on the one hand, it's natural that we want this feeling, but then it's natural that we should not have it all the time. It wouldn't be good for you if you were having it all the time, because you see what happened to a person that takes cocaine all the time. Oxytocin is ecstasy. And, if I took ecstasy all the time, then I would probably go home with strangers and let them control my life and make bad decisions. Serotonin people have heard of it from antidepressants. And I know that's a huge issue, but in the animal world, the animal who thinks it's in the one-up position all the time, they get into fights. But then the animal who thinks it's in the one-down position all the time is like, oh, I'm never going to get the banana. I'm always going to think everybody else is going to get the banana. And so we're meant to not have these all the time, but to have them some of the time. But we have to create them with our thoughts, because if I want to take it from a drug, but in my mind, I'm thinking my life is bad, I'm never going to get anything I want, it's sort of fighting against what the drug is doing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I got the answer. Bianca, let us know what's the picture with our possible guests, because there's so many questions. Wow, I haven't seen so many questions in a long time. Yay, we have a guest. Oh,
it's me.
It's you, Bianca.
Yes.
Well, always good to see you.
Good. So we have a question from Esmeralda, and she's asking which age is useful to start learning the ability of awareness to empower choices to build new pathways. Is it when cognitive abilities develop?
A lot of people ask me about this, and so I have created a parenting module in my new online course, which is at innermammalinstitute.org/course. But it's complicated. So first, I don't think we should over pressure children. Like, there's a funny example when there was an expression when I was young that you tell the child, if, when the child goes, and you say, if you make that face all the time, you're going to freeze that way. and it's it's true. It's really true. But on the other hand, then, you're putting too much pressure on the child. So the better thing with parenting is to reward the behavior you want and not reward the behavior you don't want. So if a child takes risks, but they're reasonable risks, and they learn to do something themselves, then you want to reward them for that. Reward them with your respect. But we often do the opposite. For example, if you have a child who tries to cut their meat and they can't do it and they get frustrated, and you want to help them because you don't want them to get frustrated, you're really rewarding them for getting frustrated, and then they're going to give up more easily and not learn to have confidence in their own choices. But you don't want to make them feel bad and say, I'm not going to help you because you have to have it's just to stay out of their business and let them face their own challenges and manage their own frustrations is something I think is valuable. I'm not sure if that answered the question. When you say how early should we start learning this, I did create a book for children because so many people asked me about this. So I have a webpage called innermammalinstitute.org/parents teachers. That you can, it's a free PDF for kids that you can teach your kids about this. And it has value. But again, I don't want to pressure them too much, like especially with teenagers. On the one hand, it's really valuable for them to know, like, I haven't gone into a whole aspect of reproduction, but it's in all my books. We have life or death feelings in our teen years, because in the animal world, and I learned this from watching nature videos, animals compete ferociously for reproductive opportunity. And that's why our teen years are so frustrating, because your animal brain thinks, if I like them and they don't like me, my genes are going to be wiped off the face of the earth. That's not what anyone is thinking consciously, but that's what our brain is doing.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful answer, and unfortunately, I'll have to be finishing right now. Unfortunately, because this conversation was super interesting. Bianca, maybe we should have a new tradition where I give you a little bit more time to ask the questions from the audience, because I unfortunately can't see as I'm talking all the questions that are coming in. But meanwhile, I want to do the traditional. First of all, everybody who's online right now, please leave a heart for my wonderful guest. It was a wonderful conversation. If you're watching it in recording, leave a heart or your love down in the comments. And for you, Loretta, I have a question. How can people learn more with you if they want? What are the forms of education with you? I know you have taught in school, in university, sorry, not school, in university a lot. And but how do you work right now with people?
Sure. So I have a website, innermammalinstitute.org, innermammalinstitute.org. So I have a lot of books. I have podcasts, and I'm on a lot of podcasts, and a lot of my resources are free. I also have a new course, innermammalinstitute.org/course. And I also do one-to-one coaching.
Oh, wow, that's cool. So if you guys are interested, I strongly recommend going deeper and understanding that, because I think that's what we feel really shapes the quality of our life in the end of the day, because it's the sequence of those moments that we experience on this planet. Thank you so much for joining us here in Mind Valley. It was a huge pleasure and a very interesting conversation. Thank you guys who were especially those who are regulars in my honest conversations. And thank you, Bianca. And of course, thank you. I think it was Monique, right? Who joined us. Maybe I mispronounced the name. And I'll see you guys in a week, I think. Yes, in a week. It was a pleasure, as usual. Bye-bye.
Thank you for the great questions.